There's a silence that exists only in places forgotten by time. A heavy, thick quiet that doesn't just absorb sound, but swallows hope. It's the silence of suffering, of lost minds, and of secrets that the walls were never meant to keep. Welcome to Night Encounters. In this video, you will hear 5 terrifying, allegedly true accounts from those who ventured into the decaying halls of abandoned asylums. They went seeking thrills, or answers, or simply to document the decay. What they found was a reminder that some places are abandoned for a reason. Story 1. The Patient's Request, by Leo. This was back in 2018. I was 22, deep into my urban exploration phase. My friend Maya and I had mapped out a trip to the old Brookhaven Asylum, a massive Victorian-era complex that had been closed since the 80s after some questionable practices came to light. The plan was simple: get in around midnight, document the decay with our cameras, and be out before sunrise. We'd done this a dozen times before. We thought we knew what we were doing. The air inside Brookhaven was different, stale, with this underlying scent of rot and old chemicals that clung to the back of your throat. Our flashlights cut through a darkness so complete it felt solid. We started on the main floor, the administrative wing. It was pretty standard: overturned desks, files scattered like confetti, a thick layer of dust over everything. It was quiet. The kind of quiet where you find yourself holding your breath just to listen. We moved deeper into the patient wards. The atmosphere shifted. The rooms were smaller. The walls were padded in some sections, and you could still see scratches on the paint. I almost felt like the echoes of past misery were clinging to the very plaster. That's when we found the first note. It was just a folded piece of paper, pristine white against the grime of the floor, right in the middle of the hallway. My stomach tightened. That wasn't right. No way had it been lying there for 30 years. I unfolded it. The handwriting was a shaky, spidery cursive. It read, "He is not in his room. Have you seen him?" Maya laughed it off. "Some other explorer's idea of a joke," she said. She took a picture and we moved on. But I couldn't shake it. Something was extremely off about that note. It felt current. About 20 minutes later, in a different wing, we found the second one. This one was tucked into the springs of a rotting mattress. Same handwriting. "He doesn't like the light. Please turn it off." My blood ran cold. We were the only ones with lights. Maya wasn't laughing anymore. We stood there in the silence, listening. And that's when we heard it. Faint but unmistakable. The sound of dragging footsteps, one foot scraping slowly across the concrete floor, followed by a soft thud. It was coming from the hallway we just left. My heart just started hammering against my ribs. We killed our lights and pressed ourselves against the wall. The footsteps, they didn't pass by. They stopped right outside our door. I could hear this. Wet, ragged breathing. Then, a third piece of paper was slid under the door. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to move. But Maya, her hand trembling, reached down and picked it up. She shone her light on it. It read, "I see you." That was it. We broke. We shoved the door open. Thank God there was no one there, and just ran. We didn't care about the noise anymore. We sprinted through hallways, our footsteps echoing like gunshots, expecting a hand to grab us from every dark doorway. We found a fire exit, busted the bar open, and stumbled out into the cold night air, gasping. We didn't stop running until we were back at the car, engine roaring to life. We never saw anyone. No figure, no face, just the notes and the sounds. The police found nothing when we called them. They said it was probably just vagrants or other kids messing with us. But I know what I felt in there. It wasn't a person playing a prank. The intent, it felt possessive. like we were trespassing in his home and the patient, or whatever was left of him, was just letting us know we weren't welcome. I never went back. To this day, I can't look at a folded piece of paper without feeling a chill. Story 2. The Basement Tapes by Sam. My story takes place at the St. Ignatius Reformatory. It was less an asylum, more a prison for troubled youth back in the day. Nasty place. My buddy Carter and I were there to film a documentary-style video for our small YouTube channel. We wanted to be the ones to really capture its horror. We had a full kit, good cameras, external mics, even a couple of IR lights. We felt professional, insulated by our gear. That arrogance was our first mistake. The upper floors were grim, but manageable. We got some great footage of the solitary confinement cells, tiny, rusted metal boxes. It was in the cafeteria that things got weird. Carter was doing a panning shot, and I was monitoring the audio. Through my headphones, clear as day, I heard a child's voice whisper, "I'm still here." I yanked the headphones off. "Did you hear that?" Carter shook his head. He hadn't heard a thing. We played back the camera audio. Nothing. Just silence. My gut was screaming at me that we needed to leave. But Carter, ever the skeptic, said it was probably interference. Our goal was the basement. The records we'd read mentioned an incinerator room down there. We found the staircase, a steep, concrete descent into pure blackness. The air grew cold and damp, smelling of wet earth and something metallic, like old blood. The basement was a labyrinth of pipes and rusted machinery. And it was loud. Not with sound, but with this oppressive feeling. It felt like the walls were pressing in. We found the incinerator room. The door was a heavy iron thing, slightly ajar. Inside, it was empty except for the massive rusted furnace. But on the floor, right in the center, was a small clean circle of children's marbles, perfectly arranged. My blood went cold. That was no accident. That's when Carter's camera died. Then my audio recorder. Our flashlights flickered. In the strobe-like effect, I saw a shadow detach itself from behind the furnace. It was small, child-sized, but it moved all wrong, a jerky, unnatural skittering. "Who's there?" Carter yelled, his voice shaking. The thing darted to the other side of the room. We heard a high-pitched giggle that echoed off the concrete walls. It wasn't playful, it was cruel. Then the iron door behind us slammed shut with a final, deafening boom. We were trapped. The giggling came from right beside my ear. I spun around, but there was nothing. The temperature plummeted. We were fumbling in the pitch black, our hands scraping against the cold metal of the door, trying to find a handle, a latch, anything. The confrontation wasn't a monster jumping out. It was the slow, dawning realization that we were not in control. We were prey in a cage. We started screaming for help, pounding on the door, completely hysterical. Suddenly, the door just swung open, as if it had never been locked. We fell out into the hallway, scrambling on our hands and knees, then ran for our lives up the stairs and out of that building. We never published the footage. The files were corrupted. The police found the marbles when we forced ourselves to go back with them. They said it was just kids. But kids don't giggle like that. And they can't slam an iron door shut from the outside. I still have nightmares about the dark and the sound of something skittering. Story 3. The Groundskeeper by Maria. The Harrogate Sanatorium was my white whale, a massive Art Deco structure on a private wooded lot. I'd been trying to find a way in for years. Finally, in the fall of 2020, a storm had taken down a section of the perimeter wall. This was my chance. I went alone. I know, stupid, but I needed this for myself, to prove I wasn't just some scared kid anymore. I thought I was being brave. I was just being naive. Harrogate was beautiful, in a tragic way. Grand staircases, geometric tile work now cracked and filthy, a huge reception desk. I was in heaven, taking pictures with my DSLR. I spent a couple of hours just on the main floor, the silence feeling more peaceful than threatening. The first sign was a smell, not the usual decay. This was chemical, like ammonia and bleach. It was strong, fresh. My skin prickled. I told myself it was just my imagination, the power of suggestion. I decided to head up to the patient rooms on the third floor. The moment my foot hit the second floor landing, I heard it. A methodical, rhythmic scrape, drag, scrape, drag, coming from down the hall. It sounded like someone was patiently, tirelessly polishing the floor. I peeked around the corner, and I saw him. A man, tall and gaunt, dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned custodian's uniform. He was pushing a heavy, old-style buffer back and forth over the same clean patch of floor. The rest of the hallway was covered in grime. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't a ghost. This was a person. And that was somehow so much worse. I felt a sense of imminent danger, a primal fear screaming at me to get out. I backed away slowly, my heart in my throat. I made it to the staircase and started descending, as quietly as I could. I was almost at the bottom when I heard the scraping stop. And then, a calm, quiet voice echoed through the cavernous lobby. "Visiting hours are over." I didn't look back. I ran. I heard his footsteps behind me, not running, but walking with a terrible, deliberate speed. He knew this place. I didn't. I dodged through rooms, my panic rising. I could hear him, always just a room or two behind, his footsteps never faltering. I was a mouse in a maze, and the cat was just herding me. I finally saw a sliver of moonlight through a broken window at the end of a long corridor. My escape. I sprinted for it. As I passed the doorway, a long, pale arm shot out, trying to grab me. I screamed and twisted away, his fingers brushing against my jacket. I dove through the broken window, glass tearing at my clothes, and hit the ground outside. I didn't stop. I ran through the woods, branches whipping my face until I found my car. I reported him to the police. They were skeptical. They said it was likely just a squatter, but his uniform, it was from another time. And the way he looked at me, when I glimpsed his face in that final second, it was empty. Not angry, not crazy, just vacant. Like maintaining that place was all he had left. They never found him. I don't think they ever will. I proved my bravery, I suppose. But I learned a more valuable lesson. The most terrifying thing in an abandoned place isn't what was left behind. It's what never left. Story 4. The Silence Protocol. By Ben. The Willoughby State Hospital wasn't just abandoned, it was erased. Sealed up tight after a scandal in the 70s, all records were supposedly destroyed. My group, we were historians, not thrill seekers. We managed to get a 24-hour permit to survey the structural integrity. It was a legal entry, and that made us feel safe, invincible even. We were wrong. The law doesn't matter to the things that live in the silence. The air that hit us was bone dry and sterile, unlike any decay I'd ever smelled. It was like a tomb. Our footsteps on the dusty linoleum were the first sounds in half a century. We split into pairs to cover more ground. My partner Chloe and I were assigned the treatment wing. The rooms were small, each containing a single bolted-down chair and a small metal table. It was chillingly utilitarian. In one room, we found a folder. The contents were mostly dust, but one document was partially legible. The header read, Project Locus, Silence Protocol. The details were faded, but one phrase was clear. Uninterrupted auditory deprivation is key to patient compliance. My stomach sank. This wasn't just a hospital, it was a laboratory. We moved to a larger room at the end of the hall, a hydrotherapy suite. Massive porcelain tubs sat in a row, and in the center was a strange, chair-like device with leather restraints and a metal helmet. That's when the heavy door to the room swung shut behind us. Not a slam, but a soft, definitive click. We weren't scared at first, annoyed maybe, but when I tried the handle, it was locked solid. Our radios, which had been crackling with updates from the other team, erupted into a burst of static and then died completely. Total silence. It was a silence that felt aggressive. It pressed in on my eardrums. After a few minutes, I started to hear my own heartbeat, my own breathing, and it felt loud, wrong. I felt a primal urge to be quiet. Then we heard the first tap. A single, sharp, metallic sound from the hallway, like a cane hitting the floor. Tap. Then another. A few seconds later. Closer. Tap. It was methodical, searching. Chloe clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. We stood frozen in the middle of that room, surrounded by those terrible tubs. The tapping stopped right outside our door. The silence that followed was worse. It was a waiting silence. I felt the sense of imminent danger, a cold certainty that if we made a sound, it would find us. We stood there for what felt like hours, barely breathing, muscles screaming in protest. We were complying with the silence protocol, just like the patients before us. The confrontation wasn't a monster. It was the slow, crushing weight of that silence and the knowledge that something was waiting just beyond the door, listening for us. It was the terror of your own body betraying you, the fear of a cough, a sob, a whimper. Finally, we heard the tap again, moving away. Tap, tap, tap. It faded down the hall. The moment it was gone, the door lock clicked open by itself. We didn't hesitate. We ran out of that room, out of that wing, and didn't stop until we were back in the sunlight. We never found the others until they came out an hour later, complaining of radio trouble. They'd heard nothing. We never went back. I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, my own house deathly quiet, and I have to turn on a fan, a TV, anything to break the silence, because I'm terrified of hearing that single searching tap in the dark. Story 5, The Final Chart, by Dr. Eris Thorne. My encounter is different. I wasn't an explorer. In the spring of 2022, I was a consulting psychiatrist on a legal case involving the former Crestwood Asylum. I was granted full solitary access to the medical records room to review patient files. It was a bright Tuesday morning. I felt professional, detached. I was there for facts, not ghosts. But some facts are haunting enough on their own. The records room was a chaos of water-damaged boxes and rotting paper. The air was thick with the smell of mold. I spent hours sifting through files, my clinical mind categorizing the various outdated and cruel treatments. It was grim, but it was history. As I was about to leave, my eye caught a single clean manila folder sitting upright on an otherwise empty shelf. It was out of place, pristine. The label read, Patient 437, Final Assessment. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. The file was recent. Alarmingly so. The date on the intake form was from just 3 days prior. The patient's name was redacted, but the notes were detailed, written in a tight, precise script. The diagnosis was a series of contradictions: paranoid schizophrenia with episodes of clairvoyance, dissociative identity disorder with verified interconsciousness. It read like the ravings of a mad doctor. The final note, dated the day before my visit, sent a chill down my spine. Patient continues to insist he is not a patient, but a curator. Claims he is maintaining the integrity of the building's memory. during session accurately described the personal appearance and actions of 3 individuals who have not yet entered the facility. Subject identified them as the documentarian, the historian, and the doctor. Termination of observation recommended. I was the doctor. My skin crawled. This was a sick joke. It had to be. But the clinical language was perfect. The timing was impossible. I decided to take the file as evidence. As I lifted it, a Polaroid photograph slid out from between the pages and fluttered to the floor. I picked it up, and my blood ran cold. T was a photo of this very records room, taken from the doorway I was currently standing in. In the photo, I was standing right where I was now, my back to the camera, looking at a shelf, but I wasn't alone. Standing directly behind me, close enough to touch my shoulder, was a man in a faded patient's gown. He was gaunt, with hollow eyes, and he was staring directly into the camera lens with a faint, knowing smile. The photo was dated the previous afternoon. I spun around, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. The room was empty, but I felt it then. A presence, a sense of being studied, cataloged. I wasn't the researcher anymore. I was a specimen, a new entry in this cursed place's collection. I dropped the file and the photograph and left. I never reported it. What would I say? I resigned from the case shortly after. The horror of Crestwood didn't come from a chasing entity or a jump scare. It was the epistemological terror of having your reality dismantled. That file was real. That photo was real. And if they were real, then so was patient 437. And he knew I was coming before I did. He's probably still there, curating his collection, waiting for the next visitor to add to his files. We walk into these places believing we are observers, separate from the history trapped within their walls. But these stories remind us that we can become part of the record. Our fears, our presence, can be absorbed into the very brick and mortar, becoming another echo for the next curious soul to discover. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed.